Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Evan Unrue. I'm the European Chief Technologist for Data and IoT for a global technology distributor called Tech Data. I've been given the privilege today of moderating this discussion for the Future Fashion Factory with this group of distinguished guests, and we shall be discussing digital platforms in fashion, the benefits, the impact, what's coming, and all these kinds of things. So if we could just take a moment to work around the group and have everyone just introduce themselves, that would be fantastic. Maybe starting with Alessia. You're on mute, Alessia.
Of course I'm on mute, sorry. My name is Alessia and I'm the co-founder of RoundRack and owner of AG Textile Studios. So thank you very much. I'm very excited about today's conversation.
Fantastic. And Joshua?
My name is Joshua Kane. Designer, bespoke tailor, and in the last year and a half, video game designer, which is something I've taken on alongside working within the fashion industry. I started off in menswear, trained as bespoke tailor. I've worked for a series of the fashion houses in the UK, the most well-known ones, let's say. And then started my own company 7 years ago, and now I have a store in the West End where I'm based full time.
Fantastic, thank you. And Mike? You're on mute there, Mike.
Oh yeah, sorry, couldn't unmute myself. So I'm Mike King. I'm the CEO of Numerion Software, and here we basically develop virtual garment simulation. Our background is doing that for the movie industry. So a lot of the big movies you've seen in the last 10 years have been using our cost simulation, both for animated movies, and you're probably not aware that a lot of those garments that the actors are wearing are not real garments. They're actually virtually simulated because they want to create a certain look, a certain pose, a certain outline that they didn't get with the real garment. And so there's a lot of virtual real back and forth in those movies. But now we're taking that technology and moving it in to help the fashion industry to achieve the same sort of high quality virtual simulation. And we'll take a little look at that later in the event.
Fantastic, look forward to hearing more. And Jessica, last but not least.
Hello, so I'm Jessica Graves, founder and chief data officer at Sefleuria. So we work with an integrated approach to digital, environmental, and cultural transformation at corporations. And we also work one-on-one with entrepreneurs who are building impact startups. And so also background, starting in design at Alfred Renta, all the way through to data science at places like Ralph Lauren, Alvanon, some may be familiar with, who develop virtual bodies and advise the industry on what size their clothing should be based on body data. And also New Store, which is a a retail platform that's kind of bridging online, offline. And I'd also mention one of my advisees is the Dematerialize, which are launching a virtual garment platform.
Fantastic, quite the group. So let's start and just start the discussion off with how brands can help use digital platforms to help find new customers and connect with new customers. And Joshua, I'd like to start with you here because you mentioned video games. So I'm assuming this is about how your brand connects with your audience. I'd love to hear your view on this.
I love it. You've thrown me in at the deep end.
Last
one to join the chat, first one to chat. This is definitely my punishment.
That's why you make diamonds under pressure, Joshua.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, God, where to start? I think the long or the short answer, which would you prefer?
Well, let's go middle of the road.
Middle of the road, okay. But I tend to get really excited. So if I start talking for just ages, just stop me, just cut me
That's
down.
Fine. That's fine. I mean, this is pretty interactive, hopefully. So if anyone else wants to chime in on Joshua, feel free.
Amazing. Okay. I mean, it probably started about 3 or 4 years ago. And it was really all about telling stories. Like I love, from my fashion collections, it's always about telling stories, from designing and weaving all my own fabrics to putting on shows. Like the idea of a runway show and what it was for me is just so much more than just clothes walking up and down the catwalk on nameless models. Like I want to tell a story, and I want the characters to come to life with the clothes that I create and who they are and what they're doing. And then I was directing a short fashion film for one of my collections, and it was this this fantasy inspired collection. And I thought, well, what better to do fantasy than to do some green screen? So a good friend of mine, Asa Butterfield, the actor, agreed to be the lead in it, and it was like 3 shorts of like 35 seconds. Right, this is tiny, but you know, green screen and budget and my independent fashion house, that's kind of what it allowed me to do. And it was just such an amazing experience, just from starting that point, having green screen. I'm like, right, I've created the character, I've created the outfit, and now I'm creating this other world for this character to sit in. And then we wrapped that, and I turned around to my producer and I was like, how amazing would it be to go one step further and not have the limitation of just what we can do with the actor? Not that that was limiting, but you know, imagine I could have 1 million people on screen at one time. That obviously, from my perspective, I could never afford production of a Lord of the Rings-esque shoot. And then we started throwing ideas backwards and forwards. And they're like, well, we've already created the CGI set, right? Like we built like a castle structure, wrapped it all in green. So we had shelves and ledges and a bit of turret for him to walk around on. And I thought, wow, imagine if we actually created digital Asa, for example, to have created that shot. And then we just started brainstorming ideas, and we were like, well, imagine if we turned this idea and turned it into a video game. Imagine if we could tell our story, or the story that I was writing at the time, or the next collection story, through the medium of an interactive video game platform. And that was about 3.5 years ago. And the conversation was in a WhatsApp group that just grew and grew and grew and grew to the point where it was almost 2 years ago, we started drawing out, or I started drawing out, the idea of doing a single player video game that was a standalone video game, right? Like it is a video game for people that love video games. It just so happens that it's from someone that owns and runs a fashion house. But stylistically, it carries all of the same ethics and visuals that one of my runway collections would have. And that was where the, I think that was the question, right? Where did the idea come from?
Yes, I'm curious. So, you know, we're talking about how brands can use digital platforms to connect with their audiences. So, you know, was there some intention behind this to broaden your audience beyond just those that can attend the catwalk show, or to get feedback and interaction from them?
I think that was a byproduct, but from my perspective, and just to arc back to the runway shows, I think what I did, what the Evening Standard said, it was groundbreaking. About a year before I did, actually no, it was simultaneously to do with that video, I did a runway show at the London Palladium. So I sold tickets and opened the audience up, so anyone could come to the show. So we sold out 2,500 seats, and rather than have this exclusive high-end runway show that, you know, only the most well-known or biggest Instagram following individuals could come to, I really wanted to connect to my audience. And that was so important to me, whether it was, you know, a 9-year-old girl that loves fashion, but never could imagine being in the 10th row of a runway show with this huge audience creating a theatrical atmosphere. And I love that, because, you know, the audience that I've managed to cultivate are the people that, and the reason that I have a brand. And I think it was so important for me as I've been growing my brand to really stay so close to the audience and say, like, yeah, you know, my bespoke tailoring is really expensive. It's handmade. It takes bloody ages to make.
Yeah.
And it's so unobtainable that all of my audience would ever be able to buy one. But I don't want to omit those people. I want them to experience my storytelling. And the idea of creating a video game, it's so obtainable in terms of price and reach. And, you know, we haven't got a price on it yet, but, you know, video games are a lot more cost effective to purchase and experience than, of course, a one-off handmade suit. And I think that was really something that's really excited me so much, that so many more people could interact with this storytelling.
Absolutely. And I'd like to maybe just expand on that a little bit, and maybe draw on some of what Jessica's been doing with the luxury brands that she works with, and some of what Mike's doing around the garment simulation piece. You know, one of the things that I've heard about is how fashion is extending beyond just materials, as in physical materials, and we now have digital fashion. People buying garments for their Fortnite character, for their emojis, or for whatever it might be. I'm just curious, maybe Jessica, start with you. I mean, how are you seeing some of the brands that you've worked with using digital mediums to engage with their audience. Is that something that you're seeing, the gamification, digital clothing, these kinds of things coming up as a theme?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely seeing bigger and bigger brands start to experiment with this and put out exclusive virtual collaborations or start to, like you said, go into Fortnite. And I think it's interesting because as an industry, we've been talking about things like bridging online and offline for so long, and now we're not talking about the bare minimum fact of if you say something's in a store, it should be there, and you as a brand should know where your clothes are. But now we're also talking about, okay, you gave me this, maybe virtual experience of a virtual garment, which again, you could easily simulate over your body at this point. Yeah. And or, maybe it's actually for a avatar. So it's different to have it for an image of you versus an avatar versus something that's just in a video game. And now you have to, I think the challenge for brands would be to think about what does that mean offline?
Absolutely.
Because there's such a, especially if you look at gamer culture or even, just anime culture in general, like people want to dress up like the virtual version, right?
Oh,
so
or like Mad Max or whatever else. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to have to start thinking about those bridges because the potential is unlimited when you're working virtually, but then you actually have to fit a body. And that's why I always ground back to the work I was doing with Albanon, which was really based on body data from populations all over the world. And even talk about like, how can you engage more customers? It's like, make sure stuff fits them.
Yeah, very good point.
We have a very, very interesting tendency in the industry to basically make a set of sizes that fits not even half the population. And that's it. Like that's, and so we're getting closer and closer where it's very easy to like simulate a garment or predict how it's going to fit. But it doesn't matter if you can predict how well it fits if it doesn't fit half of the planet. So it's just we're talking about getting new customers. It's like we have to start thinking about as we're expanding and broadening and we're able to like, we could basically make anything. We're also changing some of the production processes with virtual garments, allow you to do production very differently, design very differently. Are we also going to build that bridge to produce the right sizes and shapes for the people who are actually going to wear things in the end?
And just before we step over to Alessia, because I want to come on to you in a moment, Mike, I'm curious, are you being brought into this world of I mean, obviously you're dealing with virtual garments, that's what you do, right? So,
yeah, absolutely.
What's new in terms of what you're seeing, some of the trends that Jessica's discussed and some of the avenues that Joshua's explored? Are you seeing these areas come up on your client list?
So yes, but I think we're working not so much at the game end, but at the very high quality, high end, because there's only so much if you want a real-time experience in a game, you're very limited in terms of what you can do with real clothing. And we're working much more at the high end. Maybe we can just play the video, Neil, if you could do that to just show some of the work we've been doing with Future Fashion Factory. And basically, we're working on producing simulations, virtual simulations that are like real structured garments, that are copying a real garment. Yeah. And the technology is all there to do that now. And the thing we've actually been working on for the last year with the support of Innovate UK is to basically have a pipeline that can bring a garment from, let's say, Marvelous Designer or some other 3D design package, which are not great at simulation. They're great at design, they're not great at simulation, and bring that into the real time, for our movie customers, into the Maya, their artist tools, and then into the real time world of Unreal, and then beyond there, the world is your oyster, as Jessica says, and so did Joshua. Letting people wear those garments on Instagram, letting people offer those, brands offer those garments up to their customers. And we can do real-time editing of those garments, so you can move pockets, you can add buttons, you can do all sorts of things to interact with your customer base and reach out to those people that, as Joshua says, that can't afford your garments today, but maybe they can afford them in the future, and try and build. And
go ahead. Sorry to interrupt. We're supposed to be chiming in and out. I got so excited. The process you spoke about is exactly what I've been doing in turning my real life garments through Marvelous and a few other softwares into Unreal. So yeah, that's so interesting to hear what you're saying. I feel like I have a million questions I want to throw at you from the film perspective and video game perspective and real clothes perspective. That's really interesting.
Sure. So I'm not sure what happened to the video, but maybe I can just maybe from here just share a couple of quick things here.
I'll do something I've always wanted to do and say the term roll VT.
So I think you can probably see this screen. So this is one of the garments we've worked on for the Future Factory Showcase, and this is both a virtual and real garment, and so that there's one view of each. And everybody we talk to, about 50% guess right and 50% guess wrong, which tells me basically that nobody can tell the difference. And this is not a simple flowing, dress that people typically use. This is a very structured garment. And, if we look at another one very quickly here, because I know time is of the essence. So I think what I want is that one. So hopefully it's showing this garment in, this is actually in the artist tool Maya. And this is a fully simulated garment, and we can run a few frames of this simulation. And this is a 25 panel garment. It's a stitch garment. This is not some simple structure. And we can fit that, so we can grow the stomach here very quickly to just show that we can fit this to any body shape. And here at Numerion, the other thing that nobody is doing that we can do is we can fit to soft bodies. So it's all well and good talking about different body shapes, but actually the world, outside what we're doing, is only dealing with hard bodies, and nobody's body's hard. Mm. Everybody's body's soft.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of comes back to Jessica's point of making sure that the clothing that we make fits more than 50% of the population, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're never going to do that unless you're actually modeling those, simulating those on soft bodies, because only about 1% of the population has no fat.
Yeah, no,
maybe
absolutely.
less than that.
Absolutely. So just coming on to Alessia for a moment. Jessica mentioned we need to make clothes that fit people, and we need to take all these digital and interesting things that we're doing and make it real. And part of what you're doing is making it real, but also addressing the very real aspect around ethical sourcing, sustainability. So just coming on to maybe a slightly different topic, which is how these digital platforms can help drive product innovation and development. I think what Mike's done there has shown a big part of that. Mm-hmm. Talk about what you're seeing in that space, which is probably more the sourcing and connecting designers to suppliers side of things.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is all the people here are working together, because my part with RoundRack, so I'm the co-founder of RoundRack, which is a machine learning algorithm tool that mimic the work of a sustainable textile agent, which is my business, and how we got to RoundRack with the two technology partner, Ari and Alex. And it's very much about understanding that when a designer like, for example, Joshua is looking to source his material, and especially within sustainability, you need to know a lot of things that at the moment are not necessarily available at the hands of a designer or a product developer. So with the tool, we realize that at design stage, you very much need to know what is a material that you're looking to source. And it's not about dictating you what to source or what to do or what sustainability might mean for your brand, but it's about you using your own guidelines and asking yourself some question. And through the tool, we're going to take you to a place where you can actually source the material that you are looking to source, with all the information from price to MOQ to all the very important certification, sustainability certification, the kind of raw material origin. And this is very important, because unless we get to the day that we're not wearing clothes anymore, and then it will be fully digital, we are going to get to always make garments with textile and bio-based material, innovative material that are out there and that designers are desperately trying to use in the best way possible when they make their garments, knowing how do they perform on a manufacturer, what machine you can use with these materials. And so all of these work together, because it's very important to be able to show on a tool, because it is a digital tool, it's an innovative digital tool. You have to be able to show the fabric, but you also are going to have to receive the actual fabric. Like generally designers traditionally COVID and also pre-Brexit, where they were used to move very freely across country and go to trade show, and that unfortunately is not possible. But is also highlighting the need of innovation, digitalization, virtual reality, 3D, and this is all part of the same. We're all kind of playing in the same area. So that's what we do with RoundRack, and it's the important part is to remember that sustainability is something that ultimately you want to communicate to your consumer. And so in order to avoid greenwashing, avoid to say the wrong thing, which is not your fault as a designer, you might not be aware because there is not really a knowledge tool. You need to do at the origin, what are you using to make your garment? What sort of trims are you putting in? What is the end life of this garment? You can calculate that with the tool. You can know about your carbon footprint. Where is the material coming from? Where is the raw material coming from? Where does it get work? And all of that. So we work very much on that space, and so it's all connected.
So, what do people think? I mean, I'm curious amongst the group here. I think we know where Mike's sitting for the most part, and where you're sitting, and Joshua's obviously explained some of the bits he finds interesting. But what do we think in terms of digital platforms or new innovations in technology offer the most exciting opportunities for fashion? And I'm hoping we get some conflicting views here, because I'm sure we will. Maybe Jessica, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think the most interesting things to me are the applied machine learning. So I think one is like getting companies used to using new platforms and not just like the biggest, oldest company they've ever heard of in tech. And so that's like a really big jump. There's a lot of things that are already out there that literally nobody uses, and the startup founders try to get deals done for 3 years, and by that time they get acquired by like Nike, and then no one in the industry could use it. So I've seen this play out so many times that it's almost not even what's new. It's like, what are people willing to sign up for? Because there's a lot of technologies that came out 5-6 years ago. Maybe Amazon took off the market, and no one even knew it was a problem that they didn't have access to, right? So to me, it's about applied machine learning and looking at, things like it's like underneath all of it. And it's also looking at how do companies start to take charge of the tools that they're building. And I think it's like such a great example that's just shared of, being able to use a tool to do what would have been sustainable consulting. And we've seen the same with, there's Aiden.ai, which was an automated marketing tool. And it's basically like a marketing consultant, but it was go in and look at your Facebook ads and optimize everything, come back, give you suggestions, tell you where to put more to make it more profitable. Like insane, very cheap, acquired by Twitter. Twitter's, you can't use it now. So
I just want to
so accessible, but we don't, if people don't use them, they get acquired. And
I just want to add something to what Jessica said. Actually, you said exactly why we started this. I've always worked as a textile agent for more than 10 years. And then the problem is with sustainability is the access to everyone. So circular economy is only going to work when everyone is able to use the certain material, everyone can access that. So this is exactly what you were saying, is what we are building and we're working on with all the brands and suppliers is about sharing the knowledge. Because if you don't share the knowledge, no one is going to be able to, go forward. They will keep going back to the, fuel-based materials because they're out there. But there's so much innovation, commercially available products and materials that you can include in your collection, you can use. And so, thank you. I think that's, I agree with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, let's take one digital platform, which we probably all know reasonably well, or have at least heard of, Facebook and Instagram and all these kinds of things. We've kind of got a perfect storm there in that we've got the ability to connect with our audience. We've got access to data. We've got the ability to showcase rich media. I mean, how are you guys seeing? I mean, maybe let's start with Joshua again here. I mean, how are you seeing this impact your brand? You've heard Jessica talk about machine learning and how that can impact you. I don't know how you're leveraging it, but what are you seeing across the breadth of these technologies and leveraging these new platforms?
In terms of, just to reiterate the question, in terms of how technology is infecting sort of social media use, it was that?
Yeah, so how you're leveraging technology in general and how that's maybe enabling you to interact on digital platforms and what you're getting from the likes of social media.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a strange one. When it comes to social media, I mean, how I've always run mine is I love the fact that I've always just had an open platform, in a sense that, like, I always like show work in development, for example, and show things that we're working on, rather than get to the end product and then say, and here's like a new collection. I love showing the development process and have my audience really connected to it. I mean, from my social media, I mean, the first image I ever posted for my brand, I started in my bedroom 7 years ago, making some suits for friends. And I put a picture of it on Instagram. That's literally my business trajectory. And then someone wanted to buy it, and then someone wanted to buy it. And that kind of, it led me to where I am now. And I think, I don't know, when it comes to the analytics of social media and new technologies, it's so important. But I also think from another point of view, I think they can be almost overanalyzed to a perspective, to a point. And sometimes if you keep analyzing certain information, like, you know, our engagement and things like that, it's so mad. Like, I can do a show that costs hundreds of thousands of pounds, right? I can like literally invest all of our money and do a show, and the social media reach on it will be half the amount if I take a selfie in the mirror with one of my suits on. And it's just like, that's what the statistic tells me from social media. That's what the new technologies are telling me, that actually, if I just take a selfie in a mirror with one of my new designs, I actually reach more people. So it's kind of like, it's really flipping everything on its head right now, from my perspective of how we digitalize and how we produce and how we market new collections. And I think also, to throw the horrible C word into the world, and that's the COVID, like how we produce and market new collections, like it's everything's changed. Like, we're in a brand new fashion industry right now. Although the awful C word is an awful thing, I also think it's a fantastic shakeup to an archaic industry that's needed dramatic change. And what you guys said about things becoming now more digital technology being more mass available, I think from my perspective, a huge amount of that is because people are being now forced to change the way they work. They have to be more digital because everyone's been having to work from closed studios. So from what I've seen, it's kind of promoting that growth of more technologies and digital things being used, because there hasn't been the same route to market for fashion designers, like the fashion weeks obviously being closed, you know, like that's just a fact.
Absolutely.
That people needed to new ways to get to new audiences.
Yeah, and I just want to address some of the questions that we're getting in the last 15 minutes. And Josh, we've got a question for you, which I think tags on to what you've just said there, which is, how do you balance the idea of traditional tailoring with new digital technology, and does it complicate your brand story? So that's
I personally love it, because I've never been like the traditional, like classically trained tailor. I'm kind of like the black sheep of the tailoring factory, right? Know what? Like a lot of people sort of disagree with some of my measures and routes and stuff, but I love that. It's kind of a more rebellious approach to tailoring. And I think taking one of the most beautiful and historic art forms of bespoke tailoring, in my opinion, and then mixing it with the most cutting edge, innovative digital technologies and platforms is the most wonderful juxtaposition. It's the old analogy of taking something old, taking something new, and fusing it together. And I think there's a lot of heritage, beautiful sartorial tailoring that unless it moves on, unless it evolves really quickly, I would hate to see the art like dwindle and become less and less popular. If you talk with relations to trends and streetwear and all of that, obviously, like it's becoming more and more costume tailoring. It's becoming more and more costume, but I'd hate to see it diluted and dissolved.
I guess another, sorry, just to say, Joshua, I think another part of that is, unless it moves forward in the digital age, it's going to have a real problem attracting the youngsters.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. I mean, imagine coming into an old school tailor or fashion house that has no digital, almost zero digital presence. How's that going to attract an 18-year-old these days?
I agree. It's just not sexy anymore. Like
exactly.
I put that world around. Like, it has to be appealing. It has to be, it has to be inspired by social media, formats of less than 15 to 20 seconds to get people's attention, rather than taking 100 hours to make a suit.
Yeah.
Mike, we had a question in for you as well, which is kind of interesting. You know, Joshua mentioned it, how things are becoming quite costume, and you obviously work in the film side and the fashion side. So the question that's come in is, what are the differences in terms of how film and fashion view your technology?
So I think one of the biggest differences is just how much money they're willing to spend on the digital side of this. So, you know, a typical movie studio producing a $200 million production will have 10, 20 artists working on cloth simulation.
Yeah.
We'll have probably 100 artists working on lighting and rendering. I mean, just crazy numbers, you know, and there probably isn't a single fashion house in the world with that type of capability, anything like that, certainly on the lighting and rendering. So what we've had to do, and you saw with the jacket and that we've shown, in order to address and help the fashion industry, we've had to deliver both simulation and the rendered image at the end. So we've had to do both pieces of the puzzle. Okay. Because otherwise it would just be unapproachable. You know, the fashion industry just couldn't afford to adopt this.
The movie industry is a bit more mature with their adoption of CGI, I suppose, as a general topic.
Well, it's just, and also they're producing a one-off. You know, they're not producing a collection of 20, 30 items where you have to do this with. You know, they're producing and they're just spending insane amounts of money because they for a blockbuster they get insane amounts back. You know, when you're making $1 billion, $2 billion on a 200 million production, you don't bat an eyelid about doing it.
Absolutely. And interestingly, Mike, you said that the fashion industry can't afford it, but in my perspective, the video game industry can. If you don't have to be oblivious to see the boom in the video game industry, especially in the last 12 months because of lockdown. And I think that's really where I'm super excited to be able to digitalize one of, say, an archive collection from 2014 runway collection, and then insert it into a character's aesthetic for the video game. So I'm going to be showcasing like digitalized, real life cut with real digital archive patterns from my collections within the video game, and that becomes kind of synonymous with those characters. Not to mention also having current collections simultaneously as content, as storyline and narrative comes out, and that's what's really exciting for me. And although we only have 8 people digitalizing and rendering and doing lighting, and our millions of budgets are certainly a lot less than what you mentioned, where I'm trying to come from is a point that it looks like a Joshua Kane bespoke suit, right? Visually, it looks like it, but it also has to play like it in terms of the video game. And it also has to move, which video games, for all their phenomenal budgets, have very, very sparsely got correct. But of course, the film industry have really been owning for some time.
And Josh, sorry to stop you there. I'm just aware of time, but I just wanted to touch on something that Mike said and ask a question over to Jessica. So you were talking about how the fashion industry isn't able to spend that amount on simulation and digital technologies as the movie industry. I mean, Jessica, we've had a question in just asking what the biggest change you've seen in a business is when they start to leverage digital and data and these technologies. So when they are spending the money, you know, what are they doing to make those changes and see the impact?
Yeah, I think it's so important to separate a little bit data and machine learning, because people hear data and they think we're talking about counting, and they think it's like we're just summarizing facts of what happened. But machine learning, the whole point of data science or machine learning and that, you know, rebrand of statistics is you're sensing things, you're predicting things, you're simulating things. Some of those simulations happen to be things like garments or easily simulating new faces, that sort of thing. So just starting from that place, you know, just throughout my career, like there's never been a time where I can launch things that don't make money. So this idea of like, it's all this big gamble comes a lot from the idea that we need data, so we need to count better and that's it, versus like, we need to generate a new experience. And so things like, Alvanon was, able to do things like use really grainy, crappy security footage and sense who's walking in and out of the store and know to the centimeter how big their bodies were, what their shapes were.
Oh wow!
That's we're talking 5-6 years ago at this point. And we're talking, not a huge company. People Facebook and otherwise invest in this type of stuff as well. We've seen when people actually adjusted their body, their patterns and shapes to different markets, to actual body shapes. We saw like 17% revenue lifts on, the same collection one year to the next of denim. And we've seen, we do marketing personalization at Ralph Lauren. We have to prove statistically that it's better than doing nothing, right? And so we saw, like, I can't say numbers, but we saw revenue lifts. And so, there's just so much evidence that's gathered over time. It has nothing to do with like, is there data or not? It's like, are you creating experiences, systems, tools, optimizations that will allow you to generate a return? And are you testing whether that's happening or not? But there's tons. There's so many.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting being able to have that sandbox of kind of rapid A/B testing and prediction, and the whole prediction technology piece is it's a game changer for, I think, any industry at the moment. But you have to prove it, right? I think one of the things through the C word, as Joshua calls it, which we won't mention, is people are getting laser focused on the outcome rather than the experiment. So it's kind of, that's one thing that we're seeing. And you differentiate between the data and the machine learning piece, right? And
yeah,
we've had a question come in for Alessia, where we're trying to kind of provide this democratized access to elements of the supply chain and get their data and put it into a system and allow them to and do interesting things. How are you finding your experience of getting people to share that data with you to make it a reality?
Well, it's not that complex, because if you think about the kind of information you need to ask a supplier, for example, for a long time, they weren't asked certain question, but any traditional, and take the example of a traditional fabric mill, they know exactly where the yarn comes from. They know exactly what they do with it. They know exactly who is the supplier or different type of chemical that they might use. They actually have so many information within the company themselves, from water, the usage of the water. They might have Greenpeace Biodetics certification that the designer is not aware of, because they just never thought about asking, because now it's so important to have that transparent supply chain, transparent conversation for the end consumer to make sure they know what they're buying and what they're wearing. So yes and no, getting data is more complex when you're looking at people that might not have that data. But at the end of the day, when you work in sustainability, you can only work with people that are fully transparent. So you kind of cut off automatically the people that can't tell you. Because if you look at the Rana Plaza problem, when it all started with Fashion Revolution, it was all about these are garments manufactured that we were not aware of, because someone else under there kind of gave job to other people. And that was the problem. The problem lied there. Then who's responsible? I'm not saying, I'm not here to give any point any finger. It's just about when you're actually looking at the data. In my work, when I started as a sustainable textile agent, I literally went around all the suppliers in the factory. I started with Europe. I'm Italian, so I have a lot of knowledge of Italian, Portuguese, Spanish manufacturer, Turkish manufacturer. And you can just go see the factory, understand what's going on. And then from there, it's just quite simple, because now no one is going to accept that you don't know where your yarn comes from when you're making a fabric. That's for the traditional sort of textile. And then when you look at new innovation, innovative new materials, so bio-based material that come from waste of food or any kind of waste, and that they're making into product that you can use for accessories or shoes or garments. They started maybe 2 or 3 years ago to actually be market their product. Therefore, there's no way they cannot sell the product if they don't have an LCA, or if they don't know exactly where the material come from. And because most of the time, this bio-based material particularly are made in a laboratory. As any laboratory, all the components, like making a cake, you know exactly where your flour is coming from. Yeah. Yes, exactly. So that's my answer.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So, I mean, I think it's been a really interesting discussion, and I hope all of you on the panel felt that you got given a good chance to put forward your thoughts and views on what's happening, and I hope the audience found it interesting. So just in closing, does anybody just want to leave any final thoughts in 2 minutes or less before we wrap up? Maybe maybe Jessica again, just throw this one over to you. I mean, I know you're consulting with a lot of brands at the moment, generally around the use of data. For anyone that's kind of watching this and thinking about how to bridge technology and data and to leverage these kinds of things, just curious if there's any advice that you'd give them in terms of where they direct their attention.
Yeah, I would say it's always start with the business case. Sometimes there's completely new potentials that we just need to learn about and understand. But for the most part, we're talking about we have a business problem. We're trying to solve that problem. How can technology, machine learning, data help us solve that problem? If you start anywhere else, it doesn't always work. Sometimes it's great to experiment, but if you're very clear, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about virtual garments or simulation or changing the design process, like we've seen people pivot completely over the last year where they're 100% digital in their prototyping process. The design team is like completely gone digital. We've got algorithms that are simulating garments and proposing things just like designers would. So no, it's not real AI, but it's also able to create those inputs in a way that's very visual and very intuitive. So there's like no bounds really. It's just a matter of, if you're getting into territory where you're actually needing to do something like make a prediction or make an inference, like there's no, just like you wouldn't hire a designer who's never designed anything in their life, like you should probably hire a mathematician or a statistician or something like that. I don't know what happens, but we start calling things machine learning AI, and it's like, anyone can do this, it's going to be fine. But yes, anyone can do the business case, anyone can do the product development, but there's some parts of that need to be matched. The task needs to be matched properly to the skill sets. But at some point, our jobs as data scientists are to automate ourselves out of existence. So it will just be up to the people who understand what's going on under the hood and what's the business case, what's the experience we're trying to drive here. So always start there.
Thank you very much, and thank you everybody for your time today. For those of you watching, the next session coming up at 12:15 is around traceability. And the sessions are being somewhat staggered today. So if you do head over to the Smart Spaces section of the website, you will find an interesting panel underway on material innovation. So I hope you've all enjoyed, and enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.